Patrick McEnroe, thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you
for coming to our big comedy night, man. That was amazing.
That was a privilege to perform for so many tennis people and the McEnroe brothers. If someone would have told me that as a young boy, that's a dream. But tell me, I mean, you're in tennis gear now.
Yep.
That was a fundraiser for the Academy.
Yep.
What is the Academy? Are you involved? What is all this?
Well, first of all, you appeared at our comedy night and you stole the show. We had a whole host of professional comedians, which we started a few years ago to raise money for our charity.
Yeah.
So obviously we didn't do it because of COVID the last couple of years. So it was awesome to be back at Caroline's, which supports us and helps us run the event. So the event raises money. I'm here at the John McEnroe Tennis Academy here. This is actually a new shirt I just got from Nike. It's a little big. I guess they figured out I put on a few pounds. So we have a tennis facility here that is a for-profit tennis academy, which many people pay lots of money to play at. And then we also have a charitable side of it where we raise money through events like the Comedy Night, which you donated your time for, to help our kids that are on scholarship.
Got it.
We have a lot of kids. We call it JMTP, the Johnny Mac Tennis Project, which John started when this academy first opened, which was in 2009 here on Randall's Island in the upper east side of Manhattan. At that time, I was at the USTA. So I did that. And when I left the USTA, I guess about 6 years ago, I sort of had a little respite. I was still doing my TV work. And I decided, I wanted to get back into doing something tennis related. Yeah. And that's when my brother said, I need you over here.
I've done a lot of charity events, and for different people, the people whose names are on the event are never at the event. I was surprised that you and John and Kim Kleisters was there for some reason. And it really felt like, and you gave a speech about all these kids, and you knew their names, you knew their parents, and I said, holy shit, does Patrick McEnroe actually work with these kids?
Believe it or not, I'm actually going on the court in a couple hours to work with one of our scholarship kids. Okay. And the answer to your question is yes, I do. And I'm here at the academy. I have a flexible schedule, so they're very helpful to me in that I don't have to be here all day, every day, but I'm here a lot. I come here during the week, certainly when I'm home. I travel for TV, but I'm really here helping manage the academy, run it from the on-court standpoint. But again, there's a huge team, and it's just a great program with a lot of great coaches.
What's one of the main drills you will do today, this next practice? I always love getting in the head of a coach, and I'm going to get to your resume in a little bit. We're going to talk bigger tennis, but I love to just know, because for my listeners, he's sitting in tennis gear right now. Like, he's going to the court next. What's one of the main drills that you're going to focus on today? Any listener?
I'm playing with a kid named Joseph, who's very talented, young. He's 14, about to be 15. Mm-hmm. And he's actually originally from his family's from Africa. So a few of his siblings actually play here as well. Yep. They make a commute from Connecticut. So it's a huge undertaking for the family just to get here. And we call him JoJo. He's got some serious firepower. Okay. Cool. Like, he can serve, he's serving already, I'm going to say mid 120s. Wow. And he's lefty, hits the absolute you-know-what out of the ball. Right. So with him, I try to actually work on more consistency. Okay. More shape on the ball, more understanding. You don't have to hit the ball Mach 10 to win the point consistently. So it really depends on the individual that I'm working with at that time, because I really like to play off of, what the kid needs, because I don't spend – there's other coaches here that actually spend probably more time with them one-on-one. Yeah. I tried to spend at least a week, at least an hour or two with him when he's here. He's on the road playing a lot of ITF tournaments now. So I really try to watch him, and I'll probably actually have him play a set against one of our young, teaching pros. because that allows me to kind of see how he's playing in a competitive situation. So I'll kind of assess where he's at, watch him play. We also have our homeschool program, which goes on every day in the early afternoon.
Yep.
So I'm usually out with the kids then while they're going through their drills. But we'll do all sorts of, obviously inside-out forehand drills, consistency drills, slice backhand drill, which, by the way, my brother hates all of them.
I was going to say, I mean, isn't your brother famously known for never practicing?
Yeah, he's famously known for, like, let's warm up and play.
Yeah.
So we try to have a mix of both here. That's kind of where I try to bridge the gap.
Yeah. Let me back up for a sec. Patrick McEnroe, career high 28 in the world in singles, Grand Slam doubles champion, Davis Cup captain champion, ESPN commentator. Yes, brother of John McEnroe. I put that towards the back of the list because it is relevant to who you are, obviously. I'm brother to Todd Kosta. That's relevant to who I am. Your tennis resume is outrageous. What do you, on a more simple level, what do you love about the sport?
Well, I love the fluidity of it. There's nothing I've liked more over the years than to go out and hit against the wall, for example, myself. I mean, I obviously started out at the Douglaston Club where we grew up playing against the wall a lot as a kid. That's kind of where I learned how to control the ball. Yeah. So that's something that I still have done, up until this day, if I get the chance. I find it very therapeutic.
Wow.
To just go and strike the ball at whatever pace I want to do it at that moment. Yeah. And, tennis is just a great game. I mean, we grew up, Michael, as you probably know, playing a lot of sports, which unfortunately doesn't happen as much these days, whether it's tennis or soccer or baseball, whatever kids are doing. So we were lucky that we happened to have very good hand-eye coordination. Yeah. So I guess we didn't really need to play that much. I mean, I have kids that still come up to me now and say, what did you do when you were a kid? And I'm like, I played on the soccer team, at Trinity where I went to high school. Yeah. I literally didn't play tennis from Monday to Thursday. Ever.
Yeah. That is
during the
awesome. That's
so
awesome.
Of course, nowadays that's sort of unheard of, which is in some ways positive, but I would say in more ways negative. That kids don't get the experience of coordination in other sports and so on. So we love team sports. I speak for my brother, because we all did that. Yeah. But, tennis was the individual part of it was obviously attractive to us. I like that. That's why I mentioned the wall, because that was something I like to do by myself. Yeah. I found that, as I said, therapeutic. And it just so happened, Michael, that even though we were pretty good athletes, and John was obviously a much better athlete than me overall, we were a lot better at tennis, than we were at the other sport. Right, so we were competitive. So when you win a lot, you tend to go towards that sport, I think, a little bit more. So that's why, I kept coming back to tennis.
Is there something that you hate about tennis? You mentioned briefly that there's something negative, a little bit negative in the speciality that exists now, but in your book, Hardcourt Confidential, which I love, it's kind of interesting to reread some of the passages on lines people now, right? Knowing that it almost feels like they're on their way out. But is there something that irks you about the sport? I mean, no one would know this sport more than you, inside and out.
I think one of the difficulties, the challenges of the sport is it's hard to decipher how much you're improving without competition. Right. And I always found that challenging as a kid, and even when I was in college. Yeah. And that's part of the reason as I got a little older, and when I was in college, I was a little out of shape. I was a little chunky. I was eating a lot of pizzas at night. And when I realized that I wasn't going to make it on the tour if I didn't, get my shit together physically, I started to try to come up with little things that I could improve at, whether it's running a 400 or how many times could I, lift a certain weight, or how many squats could I do, or whatever. And I think that those things, you miss that in tennis a little bit, because tennis is so much about the wins and the losses.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you could feel like, did I improve my forehand today? You think you did, but then you play a match and it breaks down. Right. At least for me, my forehand did. So that's the one thing I find difficult about tennis is I think it's hard to really see the improvements.
Yeah.
And you feel the losses a lot because, I remind people of this all the time, and parents and so on, and kids. I mean, I was a pretty successful professional tennis player.
Sure.
I was solid. I had some great results. I won one tournament in my entire career, one singles tournament. So that means that every single time I went to a tournament, I left losing.
What was that tournament?
By the way, is most professional players.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what was your one title?
I was at the Sydney outdoor tournament, which is like the warm-up to the Australian Open.
Yeah. And was that the same year that you made the semis?
That was a different year, actually.
Okay.
It was the semis was 91.
Okay.
And in 95, I believe, is the year I won Sydney. And then I actually beat Becker in the first round that year. He was the 1 or 2 seed. He had beat me in the semis that year. I made the semis. So I picked him off. He was a little rusty. I was coming off a win in Sydney. So I beat him in one of the first, was it a Monday or Tuesday night match. And then I think I got to the 3rd or 4th round that year. I always played pretty well in Australia. It was my best singles tournament.
Yeah.
So that was the one title I won. So I remind people that you have to quantify. You have to have other ways to quantify. Now, of course, juniors follow their rankings, and the UTR is a big thing, which is also, to me, positive, but in many ways negative. Kids lose a set to somebody and they're like, oh my God, my UTR is going to go down.
Right.
I've found that was very problematic for younger kids, particularly, even my daughter, who's a pretty good junior player when she was in the 12s. Now that she's just turned 16, I see as they get a little older, they kind of take it with a grain of salt. So I guess it's part of the learning of it. But I think overall, that's the hardest thing about tennis.
Yeah. Okay.
You lose all the time.
Yeah. Well, and even look at Becker. Here you are talking to Michael Kosta on the Tennis Anyone podcast, and he just got sentenced to 2 years in prison. So how did that end up?
Well, I don't know how I made it to be on your podcast, but I made it big. And, I feel bad for Boris. I mean, he's always been a friend.
Yeah.
Someone that, I've looked up to. I remember when I first started commentating, when I first started with ESPN, I was like the third guy with Cliff Drysdale and Fred Stolle. And we used to go to Germany. I think it was in Hanover, where they had the ATP finals at that time. And, Boris had these legendary matches with Sampras, and, the whole place is just going crazy for him. So it's sad. We all we can do is hope he gets through it okay and comes out of it, better on the other side. But my brother and I remember he lives in Wimbledon, in the Wimbledon area.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, I think when Germany won the World Cup, I'm going to say, was that 2016 maybe?
Yeah.
I think it was 16.
Yeah.
We went over to his house in Wimbledon and watched a couple of the games with him and a bunch of other people. So, I think his story is one of someone that got so much so young.
Yeah. Well,
and kind of didn't know, have the right people around him to help handle it. We were lucky. John was lucky because, my dad was a lawyer and sort of managed John's finances and career early on. Then John went off and, got his own team of management and so on. But my dad was always kind of overseeing the financial side of it and, making sure everything was copacetic.
It seems like, and again, this is an outsider, a tennis fan, a fan of the McEnroes. It seems like your father was this, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I have no idea. I've never met your father. It seems like he was a nice mix of hands-on and also hands-off. Even in your book, you talk about how he's probably looking over my shoulder right now as I'm typing these words out. Because with the King Richard movie that are coming out, I think more people are now more aware of this crazy tennis parent. In fact, let me read one of my favorite parts of your book. I'm going to read your own words to you. Okay. Coaching tennis is an opaque enterprise, a game in which passionate, dedicated principals, students of the game, operate side by side with dreamers and schemers of every kind. Here's my favorite, including parents who barely rise above the description charlatan. For my listeners, charlatan is a fraud. But I don't know, and I wanted to ask you, didn't seem like your dad was this crazy tennis dad.
No, he passed away about 5 years ago. Had a great run, lived to his early 80s.
Yeah.
But he loved tennis. I think more than tennis, he loved the fact that his sons could do it and do it well.
Amazing.
But he didn't know anything about tennis. Right. I mean, John got into tennis as a lark because when we moved to the nice part of Queens where we grew up, they had a little tennis club. And without going into the whole story, basically they were like, John, you want to go swimming or try tennis? He was like 8 or 9, which is pretty old to start. And so that's how John got his start in tennis. And the local kid, his college kid, was running the program, came to my parents, a month into the summer and said, your son's got ridiculous hand-eye coordination. Did you know that? And they're like, no, we knew he was pretty good in sports, but
right.
So my parents had never played tennis. My dad used to take me to all the tournaments when I was a kid around New York. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of long drives together and things of that nature. My mom was sort of more the disciplinarian of the family. She was a little more hardcore. My dad was a good old Irishman. He was a very smart, very successful attorney, but he also liked to have a good time.
Right.
Maybe a little bit too much, in his later years.
Right.
But that's another story. And
Okay.
So no, he was involved in our tennis, but never, like he would say to me, for example, Michael, when I play a match in the 16s or whatever, 18s, we split sets and you'd be able to talk to a coach. I didn't have a coach. So my dad would be there and he goes, Patrick, I think you should do what you did in the set you won, not the set you lost. I'm like, yeah, good idea, Dad. Thanks. And then the only other thing I remember him saying to me during a break, like coaching, he's like, Patrick, you hit that really nice backhand angle. You think maybe you should use that a little more? That's a good shot. Yeah. That was my best shot, my backhand. Yeah. So I used to hit this little flicking angle. So he's like, yeah, you should use that a little more.
I remember, Patrick, when the ball would come up the middle of the court watching you, you were one of the few players that would sometimes step out of the way of your forehand and take a backhand.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the reasons my backhand was my best shot was when I started playing, I was so little.
Right.
In Douglaston, and as I mentioned the wall, I used to ride down to the Douglaston Club on my tricycle.
Oh my God, that's
awesome. 4 years old.
Yeah.
And I used to just get the hand-me-down rackets from my brother. So, they didn't have the short rackets and all that stuff. Yeah. So I had maybe a sawed-off old wood racket, and I just couldn't swing the racket because I actually bat left-handed and I golf left-handed.
That's the same as me. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I played tennis, obviously right-handed. And so when I first started, I couldn't hit a one-handed backhand. So I just started hitting 2 and 2 and 2. And I think because I hit on the wall, I could control the ball well with 2 hands. So that's how, my backhand became my best shot. And you're 100% right. I would absolutely move around to hit backhand if I could.
Well, and the reason that's memorable to me is I couldn't break an egg with my forehand. And I was always proud of my backhand. And I said, look, see, he's doing it. So that's okay if I do it.
So you played at college did you play at Illinois?
I played at Illinois under Craig Tiley for 4 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you were a big-time player because they got Rajiv Ram back then and a lot of really good players.
Yeah. So I graduated 2002. They won the national championship with Rajiv Ram and Brian Wilson and Phil Stoll in 2003. So I say as soon as I left.
So you set him up for success.
Yeah. I set him up for that's a
what
good.
What was it like having Craig Tiley as a coach? What was that like?
Craig was a nightmare. I mean, I was performing comedy in Melbourne 5 years ago, and I went to the arena to see Craig, and he's showing me around. And the whole time he's talking to me, he's picking up trash on site. Wow. And that is Craig. For 4 years, He was always picking up. He was finding details. One time he called me after a college practice, said I had a bad practice because I didn't shave that day. I don't know how Dick Gould, if he had the same kind of level of discipline. I have a feeling that it was, here's 3 balls, go play some sets.
Yeah, pretty much. That was basically it. Yeah, he was a great recruiter.
Yeah.
And he used to say, in those days, it was funny because right when I was at Stanford, the game started to change a little bit more toward more of a baseline game.
Right.
Our courts used to be pretty quick, and so it was just like, just come in. Everybody just serve and volley.
Right.
Even Dan Goldie, who was a really good baseline player, became like a serve and volleyer in college.
Interesting.
And Jim Grab was on my team. Restagno was a great player. And so we used to laugh because Gould would say, well, come into the guy's backhand. If he passes you, come into his forehand. If he passes you there, come in down the middle. And if you still lose a point, just shake hands and say, too good. That was his great coaching.
That's awesome. Playing for Craig was a privilege, but it was hard. He got the best out of people. I wanted to ask you because – I mentioned it in the comedy night, so I'm going to play a quick clip, okay?
Yeah, you were awesome. I want to hear it again.
You. Yeah. I just wanted to hear you say that, but I kind of make fun of your brother for a little bit because he comes out on stage and says this year was so hard I had to call the French Open from Malibu, and it's
right,
like, hey, John, nobody gives a shit.
You should see his pad in Malibu too. It's unbelievable, right on the beach. Unbelievable.
So I made a joke about how. And I want to ask you, but I felt bad about this joke, actually. I made a joke that said something like, well, let's just play it. Let's see. I want to make sure you can hear it, though. Where's the let's see. I'll turn it up. We're all doing this on Zoom. Can you hear this?
This was always my favorite. 28 in the world, semifinalist in the Australian Open, $3 million career prize money. How good do you have to be to still not be the best in your family? You know what I mean? I'm the best in my family, but that's because I won the boys 10 and under Ann Arbor Junior Open. Patrick is in the semis.
Here's the part I feel bad about.
I always felt like Patrick got free rackets because John called Wilson. You know what I mean? That's not fair. Come on.
I said I always felt like Patrick got free rackets because John called Wilson, and as I went home that night, I was mad at myself because I said, that's not why he got free rackets. He got free rackets because he was an NCAA champion and a 28 in the world. But there is some truth to this. How fucking good were you at tennis? And yet people are still comparing you to your brother all the time. Is there a little bit of a fire in your belly because of this? A little chip on your shoulder to show all them?
I think there is a chip. I feel like I maximized what I could do as a player. I wasn't, super quick and, super powerful, but definitely it played a part, Michael. There's no doubt. I mean, there were tough moments, where, I'd lose in the qualifying of a tournament and, the press would want to talk this. And who the hell talks to like someone that lost in the qualies?
Right.
And that was because of my name. And so that was difficult at times. It was also, I got a lot of advantages, for example, wild cards. I think at one point I had the most wild cards like of anyone ever played on the tour. And at some point that really started to weigh on me in a negative way.
Right.
To where I sort of had to say, listen, I got to go back and like play challengers or, actually stop playing doubles at a high level so I could try to, get my singles career going, which I was able to do, but it took me a while.
Right.
So it was definitely a double-edged sword. That I had to deal with it a lot, and I think actually now since I've been working with all these kids at our academy, some of whom are pretty good, most of whom are not.
Right.
As far as are they going to be pros or? I'm just talking about being like a high-level Division I player.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's pretty freaking hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when I was a kid, I was like, my brother was number one. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty good. But now if I had someone like me at my academy, I'd be like stoked, man. Like, cause I was, top 5 in the country or something.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what almost pisses me off that's included in the story that is Patrick McEnroe, but obviously it's not the whole the whole part of it. And it's not like, oh yeah, that's the brother of the guy who killed 30 people or something. That it's a wonderful.
All things being considered, it's not too bad. And as I said, it's definitely helped me way more than hurt me in my career, certainly my post-playing career.
Yeah.
I mean, your playing career is what it is. I mean, nobody can either stop you or put you on a team like in a team sport. That's another thing I love about tennis. If you're good enough, you can be the biggest prick in the world.
I love that.
But nobody can stop you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And similarly, like, you don't get to 28 in the world, because you got a lot of wild cards. You get there because you earned it.
Yeah.
But certainly in my post-playing career with, my start in television, which certainly helped me get my start, arguably, helps me over the course of, the 25 years I've been working for ESPN. But I think I've proved myself in that arena that I know what I'm doing and that I love what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But also, to be able to come back and like work with my brother, be part of our team, the McEnroes together. I think we both like kind of had like a full circle, because there were definitely times where we were like, maybe not getting along great.
Yeah.
There was a little competition, whether it was off the court or on the court. And I think we've both come around to a place where we actually thrive with each other.
That's so nice.
And so it's really a nice place to be, I have to say.
Yeah, that's, as someone with siblings, the opportunity to look, I got to schedule my whole calendar, and so does my brother, around us seeing each other, right? And then it's flights, and it's babysitters, and it's money, and then and the fact that you can see them every day and work, and you have another brother as well, right? I don't know how often you see him, but that's awesome. Quick hit. What did you string your rackets at when you were playing?
Well, it varied depending on, I was usually in the low 50s.
Okay.
When we first started, we were using gut.
Yeah.
Obviously with wood rackets, that was different. The first graphite racket I used was the Max 200G, the Dunlop Max, which was an unbelievable racket.
Yeah.
And so that was like, I used to play with gut with that. And then, when the rackets started getting thinner and more powerful, like the Wilsons, and I used the Yonex for a while.
Okay.
Not a Yonex, a Fisher.
Yeah.
My daughter used the Yonex now. That's what was in my head. But I used the Fisher, that blue Fisher frame, which I think Michael Steek used for an unbelievable racket.
Yeah.
So I usually strung it on the lower side because I was more of a feel finesse player. I didn't have like huge power.
Yeah.
And I also didn't hit the ball with a lot of topspin.
Right.
So a string job that could just kind of grab the ball and, hit through the ball. Because learning with wood, you have to learn, how to stay through the ball. It's not like that's all. Another thing I see playing with a lot of the kids now is a lot of them don't actually understand how to control the racket. They can swing as hard as shit. And if they happen to time it perfectly, the ball can go in like Mach 10.
Right.
But most of the time the ball goes out.
Right.
And so I actually do a lot of things where I try to get them to like actually feel the ball, control the ball. But that's the type of tension that I used was fairly loose.
You mentioned your daughter a couple times. You have 3 daughters.
I have 3. I have an oldest who's just turned 16. I have twins that are 13.
Okay. I have a 2-year-old girl. Wow. Yeah. So you come to me, you're in my future. You're the future for me. What can I take? I want her to love tennis. I think she will because I love tennis. But what's something you could tell me that might be helpful as a dad involving tennis, or something to get her going? Some footwork? Is there anything, hand-eye coordination? Anything that? When we lived in the city, we lived in a loft when we were first married, and I hung a ball on a string from like one of the pipes. Yeah.
And you put masking tape around it so there were no wouldn't hurt her, and she used to just start with like her hand. That's great for hand-eye coordination, and it's fun. Okay, I would not do any footwork. And there should be nothing that should be like resembling like you have to do this. You know what I mean?
Right.
It should all be sort of fun, throwing the ball, rolling the ball. And, I exposed my twins. They're not really into tennis. I mean, they're very into dance. My wife's a singer, as you may know.
Yep.
Done a lot of Broadway, and she now does a lot of her own solo concerts. So she's more of a theatrical background. So my twins maybe sort of went that direction. They do. But even my tennis playing daughter did ballet when she was young, very young. But she always enjoyed tennis. My other two, they can take it or leave it.
That's
so I think
funny.
you, as a parent, it's, I always say this about my kids is, and whatever age they're at, listen to your kids.
Yeah.
And if you create the environment where they can basically say whatever they want.
Yeah.
And obviously when they're younger, they kind of do anyway. You'll be a lot better off, because I had a lot of instances where, my tennis playing daughter would say, Dad, I actually was here at our academy. I remember one time she went to play with one of her friends, and I used to kind of watch, or I used to hit with her. And this one time she just went and played with her friend. They were probably 9. And I was like, well, how did it go? And she said, oh, Dad, I had so much fun. There were no adults around.
Oh, interesting.
And it was just I was like, okay. So basically she just wants to do this herself.
Yeah.
A little bit. And so those are the things I think you have to pay attention to.
I mean, that's what you just said you like to do on the backboard.
Yeah.
On the wall.
I mean, and I didn't, my parents didn't play tennis or anything. So it wasn't I mean, the idea of my parents being on the tennis court was just, actually it's funny here, when you hear John goes on one of his rants here, when we have a meeting with our coaches, he goes freaking crazy. Right. Why are these parents standing up there watching?
Right.
I would have told my dad, go F yourself. What are you doing? Because that's what all the parents do here. They all sit there. And actually during COVID was amazing because we have all these kids, they're playing in the group and they look up, at their parent, and it drives John crazy.
Yeah.
And so
I'd
anyway,
love to hear that.
The point is expose them to these things, and then you just got to see what happens. And the truth of the matter is, how good or how interested they become has very little to do with you or me.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned the movie, which I love, King Richard. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth of the matter is these are two phenomenal players,
right?
And the dad exposed them and obviously did all that stuff, but and took them out to practice and all that. But the bottom line is, how many parents do you think are doing the same thing?
Yeah,
and their kids have no chance, to be that good. So you got to be smart about if pushing your kid to do something. If they want to do it, great.
Yeah.
But if they don't want to do it, then you're going to have some problems.
Yeah. I got two little more things for you, and then I'm going to let you go. I very much appreciate you taking your time. I know you're a busy man, so thank you very much.
No problem.
I saw you've been talking. I've been seeing you on CNN more and more, talking to Anderson. Tennis has this beautiful way of breaking into pop culture, society, global. Are we going to see you on CNN more just in the tennis capacity, or are you dipping your toe in news and culture and society as well?
I'm trying to dip my toe because I'm very interested in what I call the intersection of sports and politics.
For sure.
I think it's become it's happening more and more, for better or worse. And obviously we've had quite a few examples in tennis, so that's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
To be able to come and pontificate on those issues, whether it's Peng Shuai or Naomi Osaka last year, and obviously the Djokovic story earlier this year.
Wimbledon in Russia.
The Russians, and but I also was able to talk about the figure skater at the Olympic Games, and discrimination in the NFL, the head coaching hirings, and so on. So I really enjoy it. I like doing it. I started to dip into it a little bit more in my own podcast, like those types of stories, in addition to, sort of doing the hardcore tennis stuff. And that I really like it. So I'm hoping that will continue. Yes.
Great. What is the name of your podcast for my listeners that want to jump over?
It's called Holding Court with Patrick McEnroe.
Great. Last question. Is there a song that mentions tennis or a reference of tennis that you can think of? A lot of my listeners send in these songs. Drake is mentioning Wimbledon. Serena and Venus come up all the time. Nadal has been mentioned in a lot of hip hop. Is there anything that you can think of? I know I put you on the spot here, but I'm sure your brothers, but you may have been mentioned. You don't even know it.
I think my brother's been mentioned in a couple of songs. I'm going to be honest with you, Michael. I like hip hop, but I wouldn't say like I'm that well versed in it.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Have the McEnroe brothers been a Jeopardy answer?
I think we probably have. I think John definitely has. Definitely in the New York Times crossword.
There we go. That's big.
And then you know you made it big time. I don't know what's bigger. You think Jeopardy or New York Times crossword?
I hope your dad was able to see both of those. That's very cool.
Because my dad was the crossword fanatic.
I had a feeling.
You know what my girls are into? They're into the Wordle.
I love it.
Wordle, the 5-letter word.
Yeah, I love it.
Maybe I'll tell them they got to start tomorrow with Kosta.
Yeah, it's not a bad suggestion. I mean, Wordle is the qualifying of a sectional tournament, and the New York Times crossword is the Grand Slam.
Yeah, that's the Grand Slam. There you go. So what's your next, before I go, what's your next gig? I know you're super busy.
Yeah, the road, I'm going to be in West Nyack, New York. I'm going to be in San Diego in August or September. Immediately in 2 weeks, I'll be in Vancouver at the Rio Theater for JFL, which is a big comedy festival. So,
cool. Great.
Yeah. One of the things that I dislike about comedy coming from tennis is, like you said, it doesn't matter how many wild cards you have. In tennis, you can be a prick, and if you're great, you won the tournament. Comedy is subjective. Now, the visceral laugh, we could argue, maybe just happens. But is there comedy in your house? Is there, besides, whoops, my thing just shut, so we're done. That's it. We'll save it for next time.
Well, no, do it on. I'm going to have you on my podcast, and we could because I think there's a lot of similarities, and you could tell me what you think between, stand up and tennis. I mean, it's you. I mean, you're out there by yourself. In some ways, comedy's tougher. I would say
it's absolutely very comparable. And when you fail, when you bomb, both intent, it hurts so much.
Yeah.
So
I just remember. I'll leave you with this. When I was sort of retired from the tour, and I was sort of semi-retired, and I'd started my broadcasting career.
Yeah.
I did come back a couple of summers and play team tennis.
Yeah.
I could do it for a few weeks in the summer, and it was fun. And I remember one season I came back, and, I hadn't been playing that much, and then I just practiced, a couple weeks before. And anyway, the first match I played was against Richie Renneberg, who was one of my oldest buddies from tennis. I mean, we grew up playing the 12s together. And we were always, very similar play styles. He was probably a little better than me, but, I beat him at Wimbledon. We were pretty close.
Yeah.
And we were great friends.
Yeah.
And I remember I played him in a set. And after a game and a half, I was like, I can't hit the ball in the court at all. and he beat me 6-0.
Oh, shit.
And I remember being so embarrassed.
Yeah.
And this is, again, like what you're talking about, the comparing tennis, stand-up. I remember being so embarrassed.
Yeah.
It wasn't U.S. Open, but, there was whatever. It doesn't matter how many people were there. Could be 20 people or it could be 20,000. I think there was probably 1,000 people. And I was so embarrassed that I was like, I can never let that happen again. Right. So I started, just practice my ass off. And when I did go back and play team tennis, or even over the years, now in my 40s and 50s, when I would go play with my brother at the French Open or Wimbledon, you want to make sure you don't embarrass yourself.
Yeah.
For whatever level you're at, because it sucks when that happens.
It hurts. In comedy, it came from your soul. If you're writing your own jokes, which it came from your own soul. So therefore, that rejection is the rejection of you. Whereas with tennis, it was like, I just played shit today. Patrick McEnroe, thank you. Listeners, please check out his podcast. Read his book. I absolutely love this book, Hardcore Confidential. It came out 10 years ago.
At least, I'm going to say more than that, I think.
Okay, all right. But Excellent.
I might have to write another one, Mike.
You should. Thank you, and it was really an honor to chat with you, and I'll see you somewhere soon.
All the best, and I thank you again for supporting our charity, and good luck on the road.
Thanks. See you later.